You want to know the 3 bad habits that people make when it comes to drawing? Stick around and we're going to be talking about that and how do we fix it. Hey, my name is Arvin. Welcome to Driven to Draw, where I teach you how to develop your creative abilities and to reduce your stress. And all it takes is just a pencil to get started. If you're new here, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below. Let's get started. Alright, so one of the first things I want to talk about when it comes to real bad habits when you start drawing is one thing is just making sure that you are really loose when you start drawing, or just develop a habit of looseness. And sometimes if you haven't gone to a proper art school, or if you haven't gone to school that's really focused on improving your drawing ability as a professional, I remember when I first started off in high school, I really get tight with how I drew, and I didn't really know how to be very loose. And being loose is something that it takes a lot of time to develop, right? Because you're really developing your motor skills when it comes to looseness in drawing. If I were to give an example here, let's say that a lot of people when they're trying to draw a circle, for instance, well, they'll start off with they don't know how to use their whole arm, so they'll end up doing these little chicken scratches. Something like this, right? So it's not like one continuous loop. And this is the same thing when you're drawing a line, right? Because people they're not used to drawing a line in one stroke. They're used to just drawing line because they don't do things, they want it to be straight, so their lines ends up being really disjointed. And this is something I did too, right? Or you'll just do something like this and it'll be really wavy. And especially, like I said, for people who are drawing circles, or if they're trying to draw an apple, they may go in one stroke this way, and then if they're trying to make it super round, they're going to be really disjointed in their line work. So now the fix for that is really all about your motor skills. So I'm going to just erase this real quick. And motor skills are really beneficial for you as an artist, especially if you want to be really good at it. It's what helps you to bring a lot of maturity to your line work. Alright, got that. Now the proper way to do any kind of line is to have going straight through. And you really have to have a light touch when you're doing it. So when you're going back and forth, you make sure that you barely touch the page. It's almost like you're skimming through it, but you want to use the full extension of your arm as you're doing it, using your arm like a pivot point. Similarly, when you're doing things like circles, you can start to before you even lay down that line work, before you even lay down your pencil, you just start to rotate your hand back and forth, your arm back and forth in a circular motion, right? Just so you get used to the movement, right? For your body to get used to the movement. And you can see, instead of focusing just at the wrist, instead of going with my wrist and going around, I'm using my entire arm. I'm actually using my arm as a pivot point, and just think of your arm like a compass, right? And you're just using your entire arm from your pivot location, from your pivot point. So then for my circle, I'm just going to do a broad stroke all the way around. That's not even very circular, is it? Alright, it's a little improvement. But what you don't get is the disjointed. It's not disjointed. It's one smooth, consistent arc all the way around. That's the same thing that goes with even when you're drawing ellipses or any other kind of shape, is you want to be able to have a smooth stroke without putting a lot of pressure on your screen or on your paper with your pencil. It's just a light touch, okay? So that is the first tip when we're talking about removing some of these bad habits, and that's going to work for just about any kind of drawing that you do. So for instance, a lot of people who like to draw cars, when you're drawing cars, you'll draw your circle. You'll draw a couple circles here, okay, and I'll join it. And then when I start to do the body, you just know that I use my construction lines and I just take, it's like a draw through technique. And this gives you a much better drawing as you just extend your lines out. It's much more clean. Smooth strokes, one full extension. You get the point here, right? The second thing people make a mistake is proportions, is making sure that when you start off with a drawing, or if you're using a reference photo, that you take the drawing and you start to understand the proportions of the subject matter that you're trying to study. That means that if you're drawing a person, for example, there's certain things in drawing people, is there are certain rules that go along with drawing a person. So part of those rules are making sure that, for instance, I've got this sketch here of Bill Bixby, and I've got a shape of the head, and when you have the eyes have to go about halfway down from the head, from the top to the bottom, and then the nose is going to be halfway between the chin and the eye line, and then the mouth is going to be about a third between the bottom of your nose to the bottom of the chin. And then usually with your eyes you have about 5 lengths of the eye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So some of these things are things that you really need to understand before you go into it. Otherwise, a lot of things you draw, whether they're going to be cars, whether they're going to be people, they're all going to have this weird skewed look, and it's just not going to be correct. Now the third thing, and I want this to be one of the top 3, is high expectations. High expectations really gets into your mental psyche, because the higher expectations you have yourself, the more disappointed you're going to be with your result, especially if you're starting off at the beginning and you don't really know much and you're just beginning that stage of really learning the process of drawing and trying to get better. If you have too much high expectations, you compare yourself to a lot of other people, it's never going to hurt you. It's just going to hinder your performance, and it's also going to discourage you. So make sure that you just keep an open mind when you get into this stuff. It's like learning anything. Anything that you try to learn at the beginning is always going to be a little bit of a challenge because you've never done it before. And because you haven't done it before, you don't have that much practice in. And without that practice, you're not going to get better. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and just to go over those 3 top bad habits that you want to avoid is 1, stay loose. Make sure you're using the full extension of your arm and not getting too tight with the details, full strokes. The second tip was to pay attention to proportions and measurements. It doesn't matter what it is that you're drawing. If you're using a reference photograph, be sure to take elements of the drawing and measure one object to the other so you understand the relationship and the distances between each object that you're trying to draw. And then thirdly, of course, reduce your expectations. Don't have too high of an expectation for yourself at the beginning, especially when you're starting off to draw. And that goes with just about anything, because the higher expectations that you have of yourself, the more disappointed you're going to be if you're not getting the results. Just make sure you pace yourself, keep practicing, keep drawing. You're going to see improvement. We'll see you next time on Driven to Draw. Have a good one.